Hiya.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. Can you hear me all right? Can you see me all right?
I can hear you okay. Yeah. And hopefully we have a big backyard project going on. So right now there's like heavy machinery and drilling and things going on. So hopefully it doesn't come through on the camera, on the microphone, but anyway, let's see
Cool.
if it goes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this meeting with me. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Cool. Get started with the questions then.
Yeah.
Cool. So the first question I have is, were the creatures of Subnautica designed with real life animals in mind as inspiration? And if they were, can you give an example of this?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. It's a little complicated just because, I mean, everything starts from, reference material. Jumping into the project, I just like gather, folders filled with, underwater creatures and, and land life, everything, that can kind of work to combine in some form to get an interesting, unique alien creature. It's challenging to come up with like specific like references for each creature because oftentimes there might be a combination of 10 different creatures. I mean, something like the ant eel, is very clearly referenced off of a electric eel, in terms of its kind of gameplay functionality and stuff. But its actual visual look is, pulling from lots of different creatures, and it's hard to remember the specific ones. I mean, I think like the patterning on it was, kind of based off of some reference I found, and the face is based off something else. Like the rabbit ray is probably one of the more sort of like obvious combinations of like, oh, kind of like a rabbit with like a, stingray body. But, even that there's a lot of, elements to push it beyond that. There can oftentimes be a lot of lazy design that you see in creature designs where it's like, oh, we're gonna do a spider rabbit or something. It's like clearly just above your head and spider body just jammed together, right? Which is not typically how you want to do things. You really want to be pushing it and making it, everything feel like it works well together, and that it's pushing it to a different place than being so clear cut as that. At least in terms of, maybe different if you're doing like a fantasy game, but for something that's where these creatures need to feel very alien and not terrestrial, you have to really push on that stuff. It was challenging with underwater creatures to push into really alien territory with them, because like there's just some really bizarre stuff like when you do the research, just there's so much really alien underwater life that is kind of unbelievable when you see it. So it's like coming up with something that's actually even more out there could sometimes be a challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely reference is always the way to go when designing stuff, to give it, that we wanted a naturalistic believability, and familiarity to a lot of the creatures. And then from there, you can kind of push into some other more extremes. I mean, I think, we had friendlier, more familiar creatures in the starting area, and then you get into something like the reef back, which is just a really very weird alien, more abstracted kind of creature design. And I think that contrast really works nicely.
Yeah, cool. Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So which area of Subnautica do you think is the scariest, and why?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's pretty subjective. We deliberately set out not to make a horror game. I mean, we knew that a lot of underwater areas can be really scary because they're usually like really low lighting. You know, the visibility is really pulled in, so you're not seeing very far. We wanted to, push on all that because we knew the players were spending a lot of time, under the water, developing a whole world out, more colorful, color absorption, isn't as, physically based as it would be. So we're kind of pushing against the sort of typical like horror aspect of being underwater. But at the same time, just by making an underwater game, we ended up making a horror game like inadvertently because so many people have that fear of open water, that even in the safe places, like for some people, like, even in the kind of the, more brightly lit, colorful areas of the game, it was still kind of terrifying to people. So, that said, there were some biomes I think that we deliberately intended to be the, creepier, scarier. Lost River, I think, is an example where we, really set out to make something that was sort of a, our haunted house kind of biome. It's creepy. It's the lighting, the colors chosen for it. It's kind of greenish. Mist colors. All the giant skeletons, it's meant to feel pretty creepy. It's hard to say that we're setting out to make anything scary. Like again, we didn't want to like push too far into like the horror territory. But in terms of like authored biomes, something like blood kelp is kind of scary. There's these kind of spider crab things in there. Like I said, Lost River. But then I think some of the areas that players found to be the scariest were areas like just sort of out in the void, like places where we didn't actually deliberately, author anything, but it's just like this deep black like emptiness around, that people just find really terrifying because it's just like it leaves it up to their imaginations of like what could be lurking in the in the dark. So yeah, I think but yeah, so it's a little subjective in terms of what the scariest areas in the game are, based on players, but yeah.
Cool. So when you were like designing these biomes, what kind of colors and lightings did you use to like indicate towards the more dangerous areas versus the more like safe and familiar areas? Like,
Yeah. Good question. I'm trying to think in terms of Lost River again, that a lot of green hues in that environment, which can often, is often used like in horror. Kind of gives it a unsettling, creepy. It can be used to give a kind of a poisonous feel to an area, just unsettling. Um, you know, a lot of it tended to be more based on what was going on, the elements in the environment. It's um, both being a kind of an open world game and, oftentimes lit by the sun. We had less sort of control over the way you would set up like a haunted house game, where you're like really going in and hand placing all the different lights, for hallway and rooms. On top of that, I mean, sometimes in horror movies you get like a lot of like blue lighting. Automatically we had a lot of blue color just because of being underwater. The fog typically tended to be that way. Um, the I mean, like stuff like red lighting tends to be very typical, horror trope. The blood red color that people find very scary. But that was more reserved for areas that had something to, give off that lighting. I mean, like Lava Zone, gave off a lot of that reddish glow. But it wasn't necessarily deliberately using the red to make it scary and frightening. It was to tie it into the biome itself, what was going on in there. Does that answer the question enough?
yeah, cool. That's yeah, nice. So how important do you think the concept art stage of a game is, like in regards to how the player will eventually play it, kind of their perception of that game.
Yeah, I mean, coming from concept art background and as art director focused on that side of things, definitely I put a lot of importance on it. I mean, I think it's goes hand in hand with the gameplay. I mean, the concept art needs to support the game design side of things. So there's a lot of like back and forth in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I think all of that. I mean, the visual aesthetic, the style, say of like the technology, the style, the creatures. I mean, all of that, is an experience. I mean, we in the concept art phase, design the biomes to have a lot of color to them, to be, friendlier, to be a little stylized. We wanted something that was for all audiences. The Altera technology was developed with a certain aesthetic, a little bit like toy-like almost, and I think all of that, I mean, it could have really taken on any form, that wasn't crucial to the gameplay, but that does tie into the experience, how it's perceived by the players and the general feeling that they get from the game. So, I mean, concept art is hugely important, I think, to the overall end user experience.
Nice. So did the kind of artists or even like the game designers of this game, did they consider like the game, did they consider it as a horror game whatsoever? Like, did they even kind of look into psychology or stuff like that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I would say from the start it was not intended that way. It wasn't the game we set out to make. I don't think there was a lot of like, studying the psychology behind, what makes horror. A lot of that can just come down to a feel. But we definitely leaned more into it, as you see like the response players have. I think even like the Reaper Leviathan was something that started out as it was just like another shark design. We're looking for medium-sized shark type creatures. And that concept was one we really liked. And then we put it in game, we just kind of ended up scaling it up, and we're like, this is really cool, like scaling it up really huge. And then it just sort of evolved from there, and the animations and the sound, all the audio design was hugely effective in conveying the horror, not horror vibe, but like definitely, making it feel creepy, when you're just hearing these kind of like unsettling sounds and some roars off in the distance. Again, especially with the Reaper Leviathan, hearing it before you even see it, was really impactful. So, I mean, I think, while we didn't set out to design the game around that, we certainly, especially being in early access and seeing how players are responding, to stuff like that, it definitely, realized it was something, an area to lean into, here and there. But again, it wasn't something that we wanted pervasive throughout the whole game. It's just like a punctuation, here and there. So.
yeah, nice. Cool. That's, to be fair, that's all the questions I had planned. But bonus question: how would you recommend people get into like the kind of design and concept art industry in video, like when it comes to video games?
Yeah, I mean, the industry is always evolving and changing. So, I mean, even at the time when I got into games, it was something that wasn't even planned to do. Like I went to art school. My major was illustration. I was kind of thinking I would be doing like book cover illustration, something like that. And then out of I started developing a little bit. I had more 3D work in my portfolio, like senior year. I was starting to get into that side of things, and I ended up getting a game job just because it was sort of one of like the options that I had when I, there was like a web design job and a game design job like that I was like interviewing at both of those, and I ended up going with a game design job, and no regret. I mean, I've loved every minute of it. But now there's a lot more. At the time there weren't really classes geared towards that, or I mean, there's whole programs now in school that is geared around art for video games, design for video games. So I mean, I think all of that can be helpful, to learn, more of the ins and outs of, the industry, and to get a sense for the, how to build a portfolio specifically for that. But, I mean, a lot of it just still comes down to the fundamentals of just, learning art, learning composition, learning, creature design. There's so many wonderful resources out there these days, artist tutorials, all the portfolio sites that show off the work that's being done for games. I mean, there's a ton of like art of books. I have a lot on my shelves, that show the art developed for games. I mean, just diving into that side of things, seeing like the work that's being done now. There's a lot of tools that are used that are important to learn. There's a lot of stuff that just is makes things more efficient in creating concept art, for example, for games. Blender and 3D programs. A lot of people use to it can really help you set up a scene, an environment, perspective, all that stuff. And some people really do a ton of 3D and then light paint over on top. Other people maybe have really rough just models that then you can do majority paint on top, but it still like gives you general composition perspective or something like that. So it definitely can save time. It's also useful for developers, like when there is stuff that is created in 3D. If you have a 3D block-in mesh that was used for paint over in concept, it can allow you to sort of quickly get that into the game just to take a look and see how well it's working, and you're able to see it from all angles and stuff. Oftentimes when something is only in 2D, it can be challenging to line up like the different ortho views. It's like, oh, here's the front view, here's the top view, here's a side view. And then when you actually go into 3D and you realize, oh, those actually don't line up at all. The 2D, it's like, oh, it looked good but then you're, trying to reconcile that can be challenging. Whereas if it's, has at least even a basic mesh, you kind of know the proportions from all the different angles are working. And so yeah, I mean, I think there's just there's a lot of tools to use. There's a lot of tutorials out there. There's a lot of information, and just looking and immersing yourself in the work other people are doing, as well as learning just the fundamentals of art. All of that contributes to putting together a complete portfolio of work that can get you into the game industry.
Cool. Nice. Cool. Well, thank you like so much for doing this interview.
Sure, yeah, no problem at all.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, good luck with it, and hopefully it works out for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Have a good rest of your day. All
right, sounds good. Yeah, and let me know how it all goes. So.
Yeah, cool. I'll email you the final video essay that I
okay, cool.
Finished.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Yep. Bye.
Yeah.